everyone, and welcome to another conversation with filmmakers. And today we are joined by Luke Beatrice, who is the creator of The Little Pirate Maid. Luke, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
So the Little Pirate Maid, it is showcasing during the Our Pride Film Festival. It is a short and it is animated. And so, first of all, I mean, as somebody who's never done animation, I can only imagine what goes into that. And there's so much that goes into it. The animation style we'll talk about. I think it's really cute and I think it's really accessible, is what I would say as an animation style. But for those who are watching, tell us all about it. Tell us about the story, and yeah, the whole notes version of the Little Pirate Maid.
Sure. The Little Pirate Maid is about a pirate and a mermaid who become friends, and they sort of deal with the differences between pirates and mermaids and the rumors pirates have heard about mermaids and stuff. But also, the pirate is trans, and sort of the mermaid helps her realize this. And so, as their friendship evolves, so does the pirate's identity. And the idea is that it's a lighthearted, short, animated, like happy ending sort of a film because I get a little sick of, queer and trans people always getting sad endings. So I just wanted one that just ended happy with no, loose strings or anything like that. So yeah.
It is very. I will say this. It's very uplifting. How are you? And correct me if I'm wrong. You are the writer director of you created the story, correct?
Yeah, I created everything from scratch. I got to work with some voice actors and a musician to do obviously the voice acting for the characters and then get like new recordings of the music, which is just like instrumental Irish fiddle music. Um, so I basically brought people in for the stuff that I can't do, but everything else like sound effects, animating, writing, designing the characters, making the backgrounds, everything that was all me.
It's quite impressive. And as I said before, that as someone who's not an animator who has never done animation, I know that there's a lot that goes into it, and I know that it's time, it takes a lot of time, but also it's one thing, I guess, to do the animation, but usually animators are handed, here's the storyboard, here's the character profiles, here's the character designs, now I need you to kind of make this all happen, where you also had to come up with all of that. Looking at it, and it is kind of referred to as a young person's film, but there's so much there for adults to take away as well, because the lessons learned in the actual film is, as I said, it's very inspiring. And it's very, I, as somebody who doesn't have children himself, I can only
I and you.
imagine I would actually want to show something like this to my kids. But I would also show it to my nieces and nephews, if they were that, age and they were younger, because I think that what you've hit upon in this film is, even though it's a mermaid and it's a pirate, it's anybody could see themselves in these characters and actually see how you can relate to them a little bit in terms of what they may be going through, and some of the confusion, or it's not even confusion, it's just some of the trying to understand your place in the world. So I guess a question for you is, when you sat down to write for this, was it intended for a younger audience, or was it just, it was kind of like you got to a point and you said, you know what, this probably could make an actually, really good young person's story?
That's a really good question. I I am a child in an adult's body. For in terms of the content I like to absorb and things like that. I watch cartoons like every day. It's what I love to do. I truly believe in the idea that like all ages content is really important because like I love Game of Thrones as much as anyone, especially someone who loves fantasy, but like it's not accessible to watch with your family. Like I don't even want to watch it with my parents. So I like stuff that can be just totally, there's nothing weird, nothing that you need to cover someone's eyes or ears, but it does, it's not, I think sometimes kids' content can be oversimplified, but kids can like, they're smarter than we think a lot of times. So I like it to be, not concerning or dangerous for a kid to watch, but complicated enough that a kid can enjoy it, maybe miss some details, but an adult can like see it and fully absorb it and watch it with their kid and talk with the kids and then there's the other half of this, which is that a lot of queer content is made for adults, which is great. But I think that there's a missing thing for like queer content for kids because kids can totally understand queer and trans concepts, and often people believe that they can't, but they totally can. And I think that it's good to make stuff that's accessible to show that kids can understand what it is to be trans, and kids are trans, and like they deserve content too. Um, so like I've always wanted to do something like a long-term feature film Disney style like fantasy princess situation, but there's queer and trans characters. So it's definitely important to me to make all ages family friendly content that has queer people in it.
And I think that what you've touched upon is very, very true. There isn't that much of it. So much of, and I was having this conversation recently about, especially in the world of gay men, there tends to be the same thing that is complained about in a lot of mainstream films, the over or hypersexualization. It tends to give a very one note image of a community. And you're right about kids. It's interesting, and I don't want to get too political, but I'll slightly touch on it for a sec. That it's really discerning to think that people in one breath can say, let's take everyone out to sea. And I'm a Marvel fan, don't get me wrong, but where there's aliens, things are blowing up, things are dying, there's world crisis, a lot of violence, but yet at the same time to say that a child can't grasp or is going to be harmed or is going to be made to think wrong things because of a very very simply put exchange in an animation format. And it's really mind-boggling that people can't step outside themselves and see the hypocrisy that's there when you can allow for horrible imagery, but yet you can't for a concept that's so simple in terms of the understanding. And children do pick up on that and they understand it. And, because they don't have those hangups and they don't have those, you know, preconceived notions about things. And how you've handled the subject matter was really, really, really cool. And between the mermaid and the pirates being so, and not to give too much away, folks, if you haven't watched the film yet, but for the pirate, to be worried about his pirate family and what they would think, and then coming together at the end and seeing a much different result, that you leave on a happy note. It really does show that whole kind of journey of I'm not sure, I'm fearful, I've met somebody, they're helping me see me for the first time, and then I'm introducing it to my family who just loves me anyway. It shows that you can get through all of those negative beats, but things can be good at the end. They don't always have to be dour and fire and brimstone and whatever is happening. There are good endings. And I think that the good ending sometimes we don't have enough of. Is that fair?
Yeah, totally. You just reminded me of one thing I thought would be interesting, which is whenever I talk to people who are like active in the LGBT community, they say like, oh, like happy ending, that's so great. Like we don't have enough of those. But interestingly, during critique, because I worked on this as a part of my senior thesis project, so during critique and with a lot of people who aren't members of the LGBT community, I would get a lot of comments that the ending should be more tense and you shouldn't know whether or not, who will accept who and like there should be more drama and it should be darker. And I just think it's interesting that the queer and trans community always gets what I'm going for because I made it for them, not for cishet people.
It's very true, and I mean, I've had this conversation with folks online. I hope that they're real people. Who knows? They could be
Yeah.
bots. But where this whole thing about representation and why it's so important, because everybody deserves to be able. We know that things can be bad, but we also need to know that there's positive at the end. We need to know that some people out there do have those fantastic experiences where all of that nervous tension, all of that fear is kind of met with an embrace at the end, because you need to have that. Otherwise, why would we ever even want to continue if there was no
Yeah.
sense that there could be? We already know that there's negative, and kids are so they're so innocent, and they're just so blank slate, that why would they think ever that there's going to be a negative ending unless somebody has made them feel like there's negative endings? Because kids typically look at things with, pie in the sky and rainbows and everything, unicorns, all of that. And I think that from a teaching lens, I think that this is a really great piece. And it's, you mentioned that it's part of your thesis, which I'm sure, will find its way. And the next question, of course, is, where else would you like to see this being shown? But also, what other formats would you like to see this story created in?
Mhm. Hmm. I've done storytelling in lots of formats. I've done like comics, obviously animated shorts, like written like prose novel style things. It's I love it all. Animation is my favorite, clearly. But I really would like the chance to do something longer. Um, this story is simple enough that it fits into 6 minutes, so it would probably be a little different. But I would, like I said earlier, really like to do queer and trans stories that, it's long enough that you get to know people's names and things. Like obviously we've been referring to them as the pirate and the mermaid because like it's so short. That's all that they're known as. But I don't know. I would like because there's so much nuance in these experiences, and every trans person is different. And I would just like I would really like the ability to tell that kind of story in more detail, especially to tell stories that pass like the trans equivalent of the Bechdel test, where there's like more than one trans person. Crazy. So I would like to do like something longer. But I don't know if I would ever go to live action over animation just because animation can tell so much because you have to fabricate every image like by hand. So you have the freedom to include all the details you want. Whereas live action, you sort of have to deal with, what people look like, where the sun is, whatever. So yeah, I would like to do something a little longer, I think.
I can see where you would be coming from with that, because and as you said, they're very nuanced. And I just thinking about one of, and again, 6 minutes. It's not super hefty and long, but there's so much material in that short period of time, because it felt longer than 6 minutes, because there is a story that's unfolding. And you get to that one point where, the dialogue between the mermaid and the pirate about what they want to look like. And it's it's just such a snippet, but there's so much said. And again, the animation style is really accessible. I think that sometimes, when you look at animation, sometimes it seems very Disney like feeling. Sometimes it feels very maybe anime kind of feeling, which can be a little inaccessible for some folks. But where this really is a very different style of animation, and whether it's your style or that's kind of, what you're comfortable with, it works really well because it is accessible. It's not really rigid, it's quite flowy, but it is very it's not Saturday morning cartoon. It's literally like the page being lifted off of a book, an illustration. And I really appreciate that because as somebody who I struggle with animation at times, I love animation, but you do tend to see one style, especially if it's involving a world that you're used to. I watched like on Netflix Vox Machina. So that's not a style that this animation would work for, and vice versa. But that style in like a Vox Machina really speaks to somebody who likes animation, maybe from a Marvel DC kind of concept, from a fantasy kind of concept, where this is much more of a, I guess, relaxed approach to animation. And when you approach this kind of thing and you're doing animation, what are the steps that go in it for you to figure out how this needs to look?
Yeah, there's a lot of steps. So in terms of the style, I had, again, because this was part of my senior thesis, we had a year, and we didn't even have a year full time because we had other classes. And so I knew that and animating a 6 minute thing by myself, like no one helped color or draw or do anything with that. So I knew that the time management was going to be insane. And so when it came to style, I didn't think of trying to create something unique or to emulate something else. I just went with what's my base style, the easiest thing for me to draw. What would it look like if I sit down in a sketchbook and drew something right now without even thinking? So that's where that's coming from. And I think that the accessibility standpoint is something that I've been training for the past 11, 12 years I've been drawing, which is, I think it just happens when you have queer and trans people just doing, like pulling something out of their head. Like we know how to do stuff just innately. Um, it's like I've worked on projects where someone's trying to design, you know, a fantasy character that's a black woman and they can't figure out how her hair is supposed to look. And then you ask a black woman to come in and do it and she could just draw it in 1 second because she just knows. It's that sort of thing. Like, so, and the roughness of the style is also because I didn't do ink or cleanup or anything. I just drew the frame and then went on to the next one because I was so crunched for time. But the process was basically we had 6 months, September, or not 6 months, a semester. So September to January to to construct what's called an animatic, which is like the rough sketch of the animation. Um, so instead of someone like fully animated talking, it would just be like one pose of them standing like that. And then it would cut to the next shot and it would just be like almost like a comic book that's in time. Um, so we had to design the characters, do that animatic, do all the sound, um, and then all the color of what it would look like, even though the animatic is usually in black and white. So that was all for the first half of the year. And then the second semester, so January to like May-ish, is just animating. So I had this crazy spreadsheet that was like shot one, pan over beach to pirate. Shot two, pirate looks up at mermaid, and then I would sketch it out, clean it up a little bit, color it, put in the sound, and then at the end I just compiled and edited everything. So the second half of the year was just this crazy rush for time. And then obviously there's little tweakings and things as it goes, but then at the end it just sort of all falls into place, hopefully, which luckily
I
it did.
I think it did. I totally think it did. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And like I said, there's learning beats among the whole entire thing. It's not like, oh my God, we've got to get to the main point and here it is. And now now need to wrap it up. There's little things along the way and just how the characters kind of relate to one another. And some of that kind of rough drawing that you're talking about is, I think, why it's accessible because it's not overly what I mean by overproduced, it's not tortured to get it to look a certain way. It's a very natural flow of lines and color. And it's just really, like I said, very accessible. It feels as though it's part of just the world. Like you could be watching an entire movie about this, but it could be just from page to to film. And I think that is one of the things that makes it so accessible. There's no threat in it in terms of sometimes when you see certain characters designed, they're made to look as if this is going to be the villain or there's going to be something suspicious here. This is done as this is this is just who these characters are. And that's I think kind of quite refreshing. But I also think it's something that kids really take to. With this, and I guess the question is, um, have you shopped it around? I'm not sure if you even can when it's part of your thesis or how this kind of works, but with youth groups and like other queer, community groups that are out there, have you brought it to them or are you thinking of that to introduce them to it so that they know that it exists?
Definitely. I'm sort of coming to the end of the film circuit run, which is difficult because you can't like have it for free online if it's in film festivals. Um, but I'm coming to the end of that, and I already have it in the Out in Schools database, which is like this database for queer films for students. Um, and I've just started sort of contacting different queer organizations because I definitely do want this to be something that's just sort of online and anyone can see it or use it for anything. I'm not really looking to like put it somewhere where you have to like pay to get to it or something. Um, so I'm definitely in that circuit going that way, open to suggestions. I would like to spread it out as much as I can.
I think that when I think about prides too, I often think about the fact that one of the things that's missing sometimes from our pride festivals is film and is film and literature. I know that there's always going to be the party and the celebration, and that's a part of it too, and it's an important part. But not everybody celebrates that way with a stage, with a performance. Some people want to be in a room and learn about kind of some of the work that's being done out there artistically. So I would like to see myself prides start to look at diversifying some of the festival pieces and the beats that include things like this, because I think that if you had during any pride festival, if you had a young person's film kind of presentation showcase that parents and their children could go to, this would fit there. And that is a different way of having parents being able to be introduced to some of these things, but also be able to go with their children who are going through things to experience things. And I think that there's a real place for films like this to exist. And I think that there needs to be just a little bit more thought put into who the audience is, who's out there, and how do we, connect with them. And I think this is a way, especially from a parent and child together kind of standpoint, from an educational standpoint, or just from an enjoyment. And parents take their kids to the films every Saturday morning, right? So during any kind of pride festival, I think parents who have kids, especially young queer kids, this taking them to a festival or a showcase of films all like this would be an amazing experience for both of them.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love Pride festivals because I also sell art at like a booth a lot at different events, and it's usually conventions, but during Pride Month is all Pride events. And so I've always wanted to have like a Pride event slash mini film festival. I think that would be really cool.
I think it would be very cool. So what's next for you? You have the Little Pirate Maid out and it's coming to the end of the festival circuit, but I'm sure that you're going on. This is going to be finished. This will be your master's done. What comes next for you, or what other things are you working on? Are there news stories that are developing?
Yeah, so I'm after graduation, I started working for a video game company. So that's like my full-time job. I won't call it my day job because it's really fun and I get to animate things and stuff. So it's definitely like but on the side, I definitely want to do another short. I would like to do a slightly longer short, like maybe 12, 15 minutes. Similar idea. I have frankly too many ideas, but I've always liked the queer twist on fairy tales because it takes something. I mean, it's the same reason that's why those are the really famous Disney movies. It's like it takes something that's accessible that you already know and then turns it into something that you can use to sort of expand your mind and your perspective. And also it's goes along with all the family friendly things we've been talking about. So I definitely am working on something new soon. But for now, I just have my art shop and I go to conventions and I do things like that.
Do you ever think that you would take the story like The Little Pirate Maid and actually convert it into an illustrated short book for kids?
I mean, that's an adorable idea. I've I've illustrated because I work as a freelancer too, and I have since high school. So I've illustrated many a children's book and worked with many children's book author. And that would be really cute, and I would love to do that. I think it's just a matter of finding like a queer author that would work with me.
I think that they're out there, and I think that if they see this, that you may get some knocks on some doors. That's all I'll say. Well, listen, I think this has been awesome, and I thoroughly enjoyed the film and watching it. I am waiting for this festival to be over until so it's a little bit more accessible, as you were kind of saying, because I look at community groups even around me who I know that they would want to know that this exists. So it's on my list of as soon as it's ready that it can be actually found online that I will be letting everyone in my sphere know that how to find it and where to go to.
Great, that'd be awesome. Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining me, Luke. And folks, remember, if you haven't had a chance to check it out, Little Pirate Maid is showcasing during the Our Pride.org festival on EOFlix, and you should run and you should check it out. But you should also connect with Luke to make sure that you know what's happening and what's coming up and when it becomes available that you can see it all the time online. Thanks so much for joining me, Luke.
Thanks so much for having me.